Hare Krishna, everyone. Dandavat pranams, or all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you to everyone who follows this page. I'm doing this Facebook Live. It's the first Facebook Live in a while that I've done. Initially to thank all of you for following this Facebook page. We're about to come up to the 3-year anniversary of this page. And I wanted to kind of explain some of the stuff we've done over the last 3 years and our plans for the future here at the Hare Krishna Project. Many of you will remember that when we launched this page 3 years ago, it was initially around looking at, focusing on and studying the vast array of sects, schisms and sanghas in the Hare Krishna movement. And initially we set up this page to focus on the research I was doing for a book that eventually was published last year, looking at the history and the diversity of the Hare Krishna movement in Great Britain. I want to thank all of you that took part in that research. Around 30 devotees in the UK from a variety of mats and sanghas were interviewed, and your contribution to that project and the publication of that book made it what it was. So I really want to thank you for that. And then many of you might have noticed that about a year ago, this Facebook page kind of changed track after the book was published. We changed the name to the Hare Krishna Project. And the Hare Krishna Project, it had the intention, and it has become a place where devotees can share ideas, devotees can talk to one another. And certainly we wanted to represent, I guess, the more kind of liberal, progressive wing of the Hare Krishna movement. And we wanted to create a safe space where devotees of any background, of any inclination, of any heritage, of any mat, could share ideas, could share best practice, and could ask some of those difficult questions, those questions that they might have felt were not being answered elsewhere. So we've been putting together some fantastic podcasts over the last year and a half, really looking at some really interesting issues, some issues that you have asked about, that you've inquired about. We've been discussing issues around LGBT awareness. We've been discussing issues around mental health. We've been discussing issues around trans issues. We did a podcast on the occult. We've got one this week about trauma in the Hare Krishna movement. And believe it or not, some of you might believe it, our most watched, our most viewed podcast was the podcast we did on the Ritvik philosophy. It's had more views, way more views, than the podcast we did on child protection in ISKCON. I remember Radhika. Radhika's a friend of mine. She's part of Hare Krishna London, which is a group in London that follows something called the Ritvik Order. And she was brave enough to come on the podcast, and that is, to date, the most watched podcast. To celebrate our 3-year anniversary, over the next few weeks, and you might have seen this already, we're sharing some of the films and the videos from the archives. I'm conscious that over the last 12 months, the track or the theme of this page has changed a bit from looking at the history of the Hare Krishna movement to looking at present day issues. And I'm kind of keen to strike that balance between celebrating the history and the diversity of the movement and talking about real big topical issues. The Hare Krishna Project, our team, we've been putting together a fantastic team behind the scenes, and we have been travelling quite a bit over the last couple of months. This weekend we're off to Blackpool. We're spending a weekend in Blackpool to take part in some kirtans, to give some public talks, to do some harinams and exciting things like that. And we're off to other places around the UK. You'll see our schedule on this page. If you'd like the Hare Krishna Project team to visit your town, your city or your village, then get in touch. We would love to come and see you. Our motto is sharing Krishna consciousness with a new audience. That new audience is the 60+ million people in the UK that have never heard of Krishna consciousness. One other exciting thing I want to just tell you about before I finish is I have a devotee friend who is putting together currently a chart or a graph of all the mats in the UK that are in the Sarasvat line. So basically we're taking chapter, I think it was chapter 4 from the Hare Krishnas in Britain book, that chapter that looked at all the mats, all the sanghas, how they fitted together, and we're putting together a massive graph, like a family tree, and we're trying to tie it all together, because I learn better visually. I learn when I see things visually. I kind of get not bored, I find it difficult to read for long periods of time. So we're putting together this kind of visual chart of all the mats and all the sanghas, particularly, and we're using Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur as that pinpoint, and kind of everything's coming from him. And it's going to be kind of an evolving chart, in the sense we'll always be adding to it. So the first PDF or the first JPEG will be launched probably in a few weeks' time, and then we'll be adding to it. So, for example, since I published the book, The Hare Krishnas in Britain, last summer, I've discovered about 3 other disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur that actually visited the UK. Sorry, 2 others visited the UK, and a 3rd has connections here. So at some point they'll be added to that chart, and if I ever get round to doing a second edition of the book, they'll absolutely be included. So please keep tuning in and liking and following this Hare Krishna Project page. You make this page what it is, and I really appreciate everyone who comments and puts wonderful thoughts and says nice things and sends us private messages. You know, we have learnt that the podcasts that we put together are really helping people. You know, we've got a really big podcast coming up this Friday night with Govardhan, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who's been practicing Krishna consciousness, who's been in ISKCON for 50 years. And she'll be sharing her stories and her thoughts and her feelings on the movement over the last 50 years and the way the movement is today. So tune in this Friday night at 7 o'clock on this page for that podcast, and message us if our team can help you with anything, or if you want to see us in your town, your city, or your village. Thank you. Hare Krishna.